You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk, or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just text FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911 right now to get started. That's FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911. Auto financing the easy way. Text FINANCE to 357-911.
A purple mountain majesties over the fruited plain. But now wait a minute, I'm talking about America, sweet America, you know.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to For Immediate Release. It is Monday, April 8th. I'm Liz Fell, joined by my co-host Billy O'Reilly on NCAA Championship evening. Good evening, Billy.
Good evening, Liz. How are you doing? Who do you like tonight?
I wonder how many people are listening to us or listening or watching the game or both. If I had to guess, the rating
they watch the game listening to us. Yeah, they could turn down the volume.
You know what? I am rooting for Texas. First of all, I my bracket had Gonzaga going all the way, so I was busted weeks ago. I don't know about you, but yeah. I
forgot. I did one last year with one eye closed, and I was like in the finals out of like 10,000 people, and some, I think it was Politico, I think, did it, and it was like I didn't even know who I picked, but this year I forgot to do it, so I'm sure it would have been out in the first round.
Yeah. God, well. Yeah, it wasn't good. I didn't do very well this year, but I think a lot of people get out early. So I'm rooting for Texas Tech because I can't help myself. I always root for the team or the candidate or whoever it is more than the underdog is someone who's never been there. And these guys have never even been to the finals. So I usually root for them.
I usually do too. I think I'm going to go for Virginia, but I like Red Raiders. You got to love that. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a Cinderella. I mean, they're a good team. But that's, you have a good point. They're underdogs. They're first time at the dance, as they say. And I wouldn't be surprised if they pull it. I mean, Virginia got a miracle in that last game.
A miracle is a generous word. Cheating? No, it wasn't cheating. It was bad reffing. I don't know how teams actually get over that. And I thought Auburn. I don't know if you watched the coach afterwards. They were so gracious and classy and all, but that's just got to kill.
Oh, it's got to kill. That's got to stay with you forever. Speaking of killing, I mean, the women's basketball last night was just brutal. I mean, I was trying to figure out whether God was a Baptist or a Catholic, and it was Baylor versus Notre Dame, and it went down to the wire. Baylor was up, early big, and it ended up being a 1-point game. But just again, another team. I was pulling for the Irish, but another team that had never been there and came and took it all. So pretty good couple of days of basketball.
You just can't help but root for those teams. And although I don't understand this whole turning cars over at night and torching your city when you win. I mean, I don't know if you saw the video from Texas Tech from Lubbock on Saturday night when they won, but for heaven's sakes, control yourselves. I mean, this stuff just seems so nuts to me. But
it's so funny. It's so funny you bring that up, Liz, because I was on the phone 10 minutes ago with a friend of mine who's actually a Yankees fan. I went to NYU with him, and in 1986, when the Mets won the World Series, he said he had no idea how or why, but he found himself on McDougal Street in Greenwich Village in New York City, in Manhattan, suddenly with a whole bunch of people trying to turn over a car. He didn't even like the Mets. I mean, the guy's from Queens, and he's like, I can't explain it. I have no idea why I was doing that, but everybody was going crazy, and suddenly people started flipping over cars. And he's like, and there I am helping them, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? So I don't know what that mindset is that seizes hold of people in victory celebrations, but it's a bizarre one. You're right. I don't get it.
Sort of counterintuitive. You would think that the folks who would do that would be the losers. Out of anger, you'd flip over a car and climb the lamppost and torch the place. But no, apparently it's win or lose. This is what goes on these days.
It's funny. They also say, I remember, on a policing tip, is that most summer riots break out after the heat breaks. Like if you have really high temperatures, very high humidity and 100-degree days going day after day after day, and there's unrest out there, the police officers or officials look for the weather forecast for when it breaks, because that's apparently the most dangerous time for violence breaking out. Maybe those are related. Probably not. But
what, psychologically, all that pent-up stuff, I guess, right?
Yeah, you get the relief or the release or whatever it is.
So, you were doing some media tonight. Were you in New York City once again on New York One?
Yeah, we were doing. It's a show called Inside City Hall, which is on New York One, which is New York City's kind of CNN. It's a 24-hour news channel that's quite popular. It's Channel One there, obviously. And so the Mayor de Blasio comes on every week on Monday nights and speaks and does faces the questions, and then consultants go on afterwards. So once in a while I'll go on that. It's called Consultants Corner. And the mayor was talking mostly about, or was being queried about, his trip to Nevada, as the Nevadans say, over the weekend, and his potential presidential run, and no one can quite figure out exactly what he's up to because his numbers aren't showing any kind of momentum. But it was mostly about that and some rifts in the Democratic Party in New York, which is now a fully Democratic state, which is to be expected when you have one party rule, the party will break in two in some way, in pretty fairly short order, and that's already happening here and nationally for that. Oh,
it's everybody needs a dog to kick, right?
Did I lose you for a second there, Liz?
Nope. Yeah, just for a second. But Billy, who on earth? And I don't mean to sound so snarky. I mean this dead seriously. Is encouraging Bill de Blasio to run for president other than the Mirror? Who?
Yeah, I mean and what I actually said when I first went on was a line that John McCain used to use about presidential candidates from Utah. He used to say that he used to tell a story of Morris Udall, who was running as a Democratic candidate in the 1976 primary, going into Manchester, New Hampshire, and he walked into a barber shop and said, "Hi, I'm Mo Udall. I'm running for president." And the barber said, "Yeah, we were all just laughing about that."
Yeah,
and that's what I has to watch out for. He's pretty close to the edge there, and most people in the country probably don't know really much about him. But in New York, I mean, he it's such a Democratic city that he didn't have problems with re-election, but he's not really well loved, and he's got to be careful. He's in his last term. He's term limited. The next election will be in 2021, and he's got to worry about his legacy a little bit. I mean, if he goes in and the consensus among the consultants. I didn't share the consensus, but is that he'll probably run. he's got to really go in it for real, and he doesn't seem like he's going into it for real, because you can, hurt your reputation, forever pretty quickly. Which you remember, John Lindsay did that. Remember, John Lindsay was a Republican mayor of New York for many, many years in the '60s, and he switched parties and ran as a Democrat in the 1968 primary, or was it 68? And it just got annihilated. He was out by Florida.
Well, there are so many things to talk about about De Blasio, but interesting you bring that up about Lindsay. I can't wrap my head around how the Democratic Party will support or would support Bernie Sanders as its nominee, since he's not a Democrat. He caucuses with the Democrats, but he's just not a Democrat. And why would the party choose him as its nominee when there have been so many loyal Democrats, lifelong Democrats, who are actually running?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and you got to wonder what the Democratic Party is thinking. I mean, I know it doesn't think monolithically, but you've got this whole movement that's of young voters that are demanding, radicalism, and Bernie Sanders is the clear, front runner in that group. I don't know that he hangs around. I've got to think that reason eventually kicks in with the Democrats, but it hasn't yet. Where's Bernie in the polls now, Liz? I haven't seen anything in a couple of days. I could check real.
I don't know about the polls, but he was a runaway winner on the fundraising for sure. But it's interesting. Harry Schultz must be getting a good vibe with all the Biden, press around, being a hair sniffer and a shoulder rubber and everything. Because he was out today saying that. He actually, rather than being a spoiler, the spoiler would be Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders, because none of them could beat Trump, and he could. I mean, this is obviously a new line of approach for him, but I thought that was interesting. And maybe now we'll also start to get a little more media attention, because no one's been paying attention to him since the day he announced.
Yeah, I guess I think what's going to happen is that which has happened with Republicans before, especially in 2008, that kind of long primary season. I suspect that every Democrat's going to have their flash in the pan 5 minutes, and they're going to, maybe not everyone, but everyone's going to have their moment, and they're going to be hot for a little bit. Buttigieg right now is exciting, and Beto O'Rourke had his moment. I think that's going to go on for a number of months, and then the party inexorably is going to run to Joe Biden. I'm looking at the survey now. The RC, the Real Clear Politics average, has Biden, leading the pack at 30%, 29.9, with Sanders at 21, and after that, it's Kamala Harris at 9.7, and then O'Rourke and down the list. But Biden's way ahead with Sanders behind him. It'd be curious to see if Biden's numbers hold in the next couple of polls, because he's been getting hammered so badly on the touchy-feely stuff. So we'll see, but I don't know. That's just my take. I know we both talked about Kamala Harris. I think she'll be in the hunt, definitely, and I think she'll have her moment, and we'll move up after the debates. I think Democrats will see a woman of color and substance up the group. Her policies or not, and she's probably not my cup of tea ideologically, but they'll like that. She'll have her move. But I think that's much. Hey, Liz, Did I lose? Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
You're just breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, I've got Verizon Fios. I don't know what's happening here, but it kicks on and off sometimes here.
Yeah, it's all right. Did you happen to see Mayor Pete's comments today? I thought they were spectacular, and I'm rooting for him just because I not because I agree with him on most issues, but today he made some comments about being gay, and he said that people like that. His point was he was born this way, and that Mike Pence and others who can't accept that really need to take their beef up with their creator and not with Mayor Pete, because it's a higher power that determined who he is. And I thought that was very powerful, and I haven't seen anybody else talk about that issue this way, but it was very interesting, and I wonder how Pence will respond. because he'll be forced to respond at some point. Not today, he won't have to. He will. Because he took it right out of the realm of homophobia and bigotry, and he took what right
to and I hadn't seen Buttigieg, who I can now pronounce his name for. This is the first I actually saw him speak, and I thought he handled that incredibly. Yeah. But he, he's a cool customer though. Buttigieg seems like a cool customer, and really framed that, very well. And the thing is, he took piety and religion and handed it right back to Pence, really, really cleverly. And we'll see how Pence responds. But that was a big time moment for Buttigieg, no question. See, I got his name in there again.
You did, and you got it right. And did you see a couple of weeks ago his comments about Chick-fil-A? Because they were equally good, and again, so clever. Because Chick-fil-A has a reputation for being homophobic or anti-gay, and Buttigieg, Pete said, "Well, I love they have great chicken. I don't really agree with their policies. I think they have great chicken, so maybe we can meet in the middle and we can actually sit down and talk about it." And it was just great. Rather than getting on his high horse and the finger wagging and lecturing and pontificating, he's brought this issue down to a very human level with some humor. But I think, like I said, Pence is going to have to answer for sure. It's hard to argue with, if you're a religious man, it's hard to argue with his comments about this.
No, that's right. I think the internet finally just came back to normal here. I hope. Apologies for that. But no, I didn't see the Chick-fil-A comment. I saw. Were you talking about Beto O'Rourke talking about Chick-fil-A, or was this Buttigieg?
Buttigieg, yeah.
Said it again.
Yep. So I'm sorry. The internet here seems to be unusable, which makes me so mad because I pay for the best. And it's.
Hey, Bill, do you want me to just drop you and call you on your phone?
Yeah, could you? Yeah, this is ridiculous on my end. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Give me just a second. I'll get you.
Yeah, I'm like, wait for him. No. I think I've said this before a lot over the last couple of weeks. I do think Buttigieg is the guy to watch. And if nothing else, because hopefully he will add some, intelligence and reason to the discourse. And he can, I haven't seen an angry, nasty word out of his mouth. And he's so well informed and articulate and natural. And in my view, the longer he stays on the front page or in the media's eye, the better off they're all. I think he'll bring the best out of all the. Hopefully, he will bring the best out of everybody who's participating in this whole race. That would be. He will have achieved something dramatic, whether he makes it to the end or not, or to the final round or not. But I think, by contrast, it would be wonderful to see him on a debate stage with his colleagues, his peers, or his opponents.
Yep. Liz, I think Rick is going to call me on my regular line because this internet is so broken up.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I just realized that I don't have my phone with me, and that's where I have your number. So hang on a second. I'm trying to find you.
Yep. So if you could filibuster for a moment, Liz, or maybe sing us a song.
I can't sing. One of the things I do want to talk to you about is the 60 Minutes broadcast last night. I don't know if you had a chance to see the show, but there were a couple of terrific segments, and one of them involved Ken Langone, the founder of Home Depot, and he's currently the founder and chairman of the NYU Langone Medical Center here in New York City. And he announced several months ago that going forward, every single medical student at NYU Medical School will attend tuition free. I mean, it's an astounding gift to the school. He donated himself a good part of the money, and then he raised the rest. And this is something he's been working on for the last almost 11 years. Yeah.
All right, so we should have you by phone now, sir.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, Rick. Thank
No
you.
worries.
Liz?
Yeah.
Oh, it may not be as good, but I can hear. You could have been on Pluto from where I was sitting. It was just completely garbled. But I did hear you talk about the NYU
Yes.
Medical School. Yeah, it's so funny. Was it you that told me of about somebody who was choosing between NYU and U Chicago?
No.
And chose you. Somebody was just telling me they got in, or someone they knew got into both NYU and the University of Chicago, and that I think it was a woman. She had her boyfriend was living in Chicago, so she chose Chicago, and it's going to end up costing her like $500,000, and it would have been free at NYU.
It was such a obviously, and the gift itself got some publicity a couple months ago when it was first announced. But the piece on 60 Minutes, the interview with Ken Langone, was remarkable, and his point here was that in addition to the fact that these guys are just buried in student debt for literally for decades, because they don't start making money for such a long time after their residency, and they're also, the interest is compounded on their loans, and so maybe they borrowed $200,000, but by the time they're done, it's more like $400,000 or $500,000. Is that his hope is that they will have a mindset of giving back when the time comes, and that when they start treating patients on their own, that if someone comes in and can't afford to pay, that they'll remember, oh yeah, someone did pay it forward. Basically, they'll pay it forward. It was just terrific, and I don't know if you, I guess you didn't see it, but interestingly, there's an ant at every picnic, and sure enough, there was Ezekiel Rahm Emanuel's brother, as you know, who was one of the architects of Obamacare. He was President Obama's healthcare advisor, and he's now at UPenn. And I don't know if he's the dean of the med school there or the dean of the public health school or something. And he, of course, rained all over the idea. And he said, well, first of all, this is not something that's new. We've discussed it for years, but I don't know why you would give free tuition to med students who are going to turn around and make a lot of money in certain fields like ophthalmology and dermatology, that actually only some students should get free tuition. It was so absurd. It's so small. And rather than saying, listen, this is a standard we should all try to meet now, or there should be some way we all try to get on board, it was very petty. But I just think what Ken Langone has done is tremendous.
Yeah, it is. I'm actually going to see him at a dinner next week in New York. And remember the disinvitation, the Buckley program disinvitation dinner?
Yes.
He's going to be. I think he's going to be there. Is that the dinner? I believe it is. Yeah, he's on the dinner committee, and I'll definitely mention that. But I wonder how. I mean, that's clearly going to be emulated. I would imagine anyway. It's maybe not clearly, but some of these universities, especially the Ivy Leaguers, have such massive endowments that they can afford to do it. Where the endowments are spitting off enough money to really, to pay for lots and lots of students, if not all of them. And I wonder if that's what happens down the road, and what the runoff effect of that is. I mean, I don't mean to be the ant at the picnic too, but I wonder whether lesser schools will be able to compete. But I guess you go where you can get in, and if it's free, that's just a plus. But I love the idea of that happening without the government. You know what I mean? It's like NYU is doing that. The government's not putting anything into that. That sounds great to me. That's terrific.
Right, and obviously, you got to believe that some of these students are going to turn around and repay the favor, not just to the patients that they treat, but to the school itself. So that hopefully this becomes a revolving fund, or a fund that continues to build with gifts from grateful alums.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And also, NYU already has a fabulous medical school, but that's going to shoot right up to the top. I mean, the applications. The quality of the applications going in are going to be the absolute cream of the crop. I mean, if do you go to X medical school and pay $500,000, or if you can get into NYU, you go for free. I mean, they're going to get the absolute cream of the crop. It's a really smart idea too for NYU itself, and which is my alma mater in the undergraduate, and I think that excellence will carry throughout all the programs.
Well,
at least reputationally.
No question, and hopefully inspire other philanthropy to do, take similar action. But it's interesting in some of the interviews with a couple of the med school students, you hear over and over again that in addition to the student loans they've taken out, they're also attending school full time, which is a boatload of stress, but they're working another part-time job. So there's a lot going on that they're juggling, and many of them also are carrying college loans. So you've got the college loans compounded by the med school loans. And anyway, you got to really love what you're doing to take on that kind of debt. And that's at such a young age. People are doing it. I mean, they're taking on that debt. It's just, it's really bananas. When you think about the cost, we have, one in college now, and one finished last year, and you've been in the same situation. And the numbers are just staggering. And it's just, the truth is that government money kicked up the prices. It was just free money pouring into universities. And there was one study that there was a school, I don't remember which it was, and I don't want to misquote a school, but there was a school that was trying to keep itself affordable, and its application rate kept falling. And finally, they determined that in order to get more applications, they had to raise the price, because people assumed that a more expensive school was a better school. And indeed, they raised the price of tuition, and the applications went up. And it just is crazy mindset that, the more you cost, the better you are. It's just not true. Nope, it's just not true. Well, you and I, of course, and then today, several of the parents who were ensnared in the college cheating scandal pled guilty. I don't know if you saw that. Not all of them are favorite actors.
I did, yeah.
Yeah,
I did, yeah.
And obviously, the goal here is to avoid jail time. There's everyone's guessed that they'll at least have to serve a couple of months because the judge has been so firm about consequences. But how do you feel about jail time? No jail time. We've tried. I did think it was interesting how many of them immediately not only pled but issued apologies and did all that, and there wasn't a lot of indignant, or maybe privately there was, but there wasn't indignant reaction to the whole thing, or let me try to explain it because it was basically I got busted. It's true. I'm embarrassed. I'll pay the piper.
Yeah, I've got to say that being sensitive that white collar crime needs to pay its share of punishment. But I was really surprised to see that there'd be jail time for that. Because it was private individuals and then universities. I know that universities get funded with government money, so maybe that has something to do with it, but I don't think so. But it was like, I could see them getting sued. I think they should be sued by the universities or sued by other students that couldn't get in, or the university should be sued. I could see that. But I was very surprised that jail time was involved. And I guess there's fraud and other stuff, and those laws kicked in. But that didn't seem commensurate with the crime to me. But maybe I'm being too lenient,
Well, I think the crime was that a lot of them, I don't know, all of them wrote checks, made tax deductible contributions to this phony 501c3 that the shyster had set up for himself. That Rick.
I guess that's where it makes sense. That makes sense. I hadn't thought about it that way. Yeah, that makes sense.
Odd is that the 501c3 was a phony, and that these guys.
It's a federal crime because it's right.
So that in addition to cheating to get their kids in and falsifying the applications and the portfolios and making up, all the nonsense, that the crime was taking a tax deduction for a not-for-profit that was not a not-for-profit.
Okay, I'm sold. Lock them up.
That's where they're dead to right. Dead to right.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes absolute sense. I had forgotten about or maybe I didn't even know about the nonprofit part of it. That you run, and also you do interstate stuff there also. So you're probably getting nailed for wire fraud too.
Yeah. It really it just proves that how the detail and the depths to which they were all willing to sink and the lengths they were willing to go literally to cheat. They cheated the government, they cheated the school. I mean, they cheated other students, they cheated the system. But that's actually technically and legally the biggest crime they committed.
Right.
What
I couldn't believe was the figures. Like, I was surprised to see how much money they were willing to give to get those kids into school. I mean, couldn't they just have donated that much money and gotten their kids into college? Wink, wink. I mean, it does happen. I mean, it's not unheard of.
Built a library. I don't even know if it's worth really trying to psychoanalyze how desperate these parents were. But to think it would be worth $500,000 to you to get your kid in to get a USC diploma is really all it amounts to. A diploma from a school.
Right.
And actually fabricate from whole cloth things like, a career row. I mean, a whole, career of row as a on the crew team or pole vault or whatever it was. It's so twisted. So twisted.
Oh, it is twisted. I think we talked about it maybe on the last show, but someone came up with an ingenious, I think Trevor Noah came up with an ingenious punishment for this all, is those universities should have to play those students on the teams that they claim to be experts in, in the sports. So, let that Southern Cal kicker be the student that faked being a kicker. That was a pretty interesting idea. By the way, it's 17, speaking of sports, 17-13 Cavaliers, for anybody wondering. But it's, but I $500,000 in addition to the tuition for USC. I mean, I know it's a good school, but it's not Stanford. Is it me? I mean, I know Southern Cal is a good school, but it's not. Is it that good a school? Is it worth $1 million to send your child there?
I can't imagine.
Not my book.
I really don't know that any school is. I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot. My dad was just the most practical. He took out a map for me. I was one of 6 kids, and he knew he was going to be paying for school. We took out student loans for a good part of them. At the time, they had those GSL loans. I don't know if you remember those, but he was he was working his tail off to help us get through school. And he took out a map and a compass, and he drew a radius. I would live, grew up in New York, and he said 250 miles. That's it. You got to find a school within 250 miles. There's a school for everyone in here, and if you can't find a school here, then you're not going to school. No one was getting on a plane and flying out, to some school out west.
Right.
Weather.
Sunny California.
Oh, I prefer the weather on the West Coast. Or I have friends who go out, Arizona, California. It was not happening. But his bigger point was there's a school for everyone, and that every school has more to offer you than you could ever take advantage of, which I always thought was such a great point and a very good lesson.
That's a great way to put it. That's absolutely. I certainly didn't take advantage of it.
Every single school, whether it's your local community college, a tech school, a vocational school, or Harvard, there's more there than any student could possibly take advantage of.
In a whole lifetime, that's right.
A lifetime. So I
also wonder. I mean, I just think the value of a college degree is. I mean, I know it's cheapened and lessened for a lot of different reasons. First, like the kind of overabundance of them. Too many schools just push graduates through, and the curriculums are not that challenging. But I mean, I think about this all the time. Walking around with a phone in your pocket where you've got the entire world's wisdom, 2 button pushes away, I would think would also cheapen a degree. I know you're being taught, or supposedly being taught, to think critically, but all the answers to all of the questions that you would have in college are Google away. But still the prices go up. I really don't get it. I thought that the online classes were going to really explode, and they were calling them what do they call them? MOB, M-O-B. I forgot the acronym. I wrote a column about it once. But it was the online classes. I thought that a lot of universities were going to have shut down by now, and that hasn't happened.
No.
But I just don't see how they keep up at this pace.
Well, I think, listen, I think a huge part of the college experience is just that. It's the experience. It's living on your own and growing up and learning to get along with your peers and navigating your way through everything from, dorm life to off-campus housing to having a part-time job to pay for to all that kind of stuff. It's not just the academics. I mean, that's really probably developmentally the greater value. But I think in this case, so much of this nonsense about the competition to get kids into school is really the network that's developed for later on in life. So for postgraduate, when you're going to look for a job, it's,
that's the truth.
My friend's dad, my roommate's dad's helping me here, or my friend's mom's going to help me on Wall Street, or whatever it is. It's the network that you get. That's what you're buying. It really is what you're buying into. It's a down payment on that for later.
And that's the absolute truth. That's the absolute truth. That is the unvarnished truth.
Yeah, it's
That's
not
right.
It's not the French test. It's not the American Studies class that you took sophomore year. It's that other stuff.
Right. No, that's right. That is what you're buying. You're buying the name, and you're buying the network that you come out with. I think that's right.
Yeah. What's going on? What I haven't followed is what's happening to some of these coaches and where the governance broke down with some of these applications and all of this and the bribes and the like. Have you?
No, I haven't. I mean, I just find it like near unbelievable that they could have pulled this off. I mean, you would think with Title IX and with the scarcity of those scholarships and the I mean I know they weren't giving athletic scholarships, but they were talking about taking people as walk-ons and that kind of thing. I would think that would be an incredibly tight ship. And there'd be just no room for fudging it. But I guess these coaches were the final authority on everything athletic. And I mean, God knows they probably make pretty good money. And their housing's probably covered, on campuses if they want it. But I was really surprised that they could just pull the scam off.
Yeah, well, every once in a while, it's just great to see the stuff come crashing down.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, that was good investigative work, and there was a whistleblower that blew it, but boy, did they give up. I mean, the woman, Laura, what's her last name? I can't remember. The very well known one that from
Lori Loughlin.
Yes, exactly. I mean, utterly career destroyed. I mean, will never recover. I mean, just crazy. What were you thinking? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
She was desperate. Two girls. The whole thing.
But it was back on politics. Apparently, somebody else jumped in today. They mentioned the person's name on New York One, and I'd never heard of the person. It's like, is just anybody jumping at this point? I think it was a congressman from someplace, and I'd never heard the name before.
Right? Not Tim Ryan, the one who wanted to oust Nancy Pelosi.
No, it wasn't Tim Ryan. No. He actually be good. But there was another name that popped up. I didn't know it. Did Tim Ryan jump in as well?
Yeah, or he's one of the ones on the sidelines. He's thinking about jumping in. There's,
right.
there are now buckets.
I'm thinking about it too.
I'm thinking about it. I have an exploratory committee. I have whatever it is.
Don't rule anything out. Yeah. I haven't ruled it out, Liz. Have you ruled it out?
Oh, God, no, because I think I'm free next year. Actually, I think I'm available. My book's going to wind down, and I should have some free time. I heard Hillary Clinton apparently was on a panel yesterday. Oh, no, she was talking maybe to Tina Brown or someone yesterday and about all the women in the race this time around. And she did say she thought it was going to be an easier path for them because there's more than one of them. So the focus wouldn't just be on gender. You've got 5 women running. It's not. And I think she's just never going to get over it. She's just never going to accept the fact that she didn't win, and she'll always blame it on the fact that she was a woman. I think you're right. I don't think she'll ever get over that. But having worked with female candidates, and you were one of them. I didn't see it so much in your race, Liz. But I remember when I worked and you were helpful also with KT McFarland's race in New York, and I was struck. She was running for Senate to run against Hillary Clinton, and she was in the Republican primary, and I was really surprised to see just how different the press treated her as a female candidate. The questions were entirely different, and I won't even go through what some of them were, but it was entirely different than how they would cover
a man, and maybe that's changed a little bit. And I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it. And I've worked with other female candidates over the years, and it probably wasn't as intense as that race. That race was very intense for a short period of time. But I think Hillary Clinton's probably right in that it is, women are breaking through in numbers, and there's no shock value anymore, and the questions probably are no longer about how you wear your hair and your clothes, and that's a good thing.
Whether you're shrill or not.
You remember Sarah Palin getting hit for when she ran for spending money on a wardrobe. It was a lot of money, granted, but it was just stuff that you would never ask a guy, and maybe that's changing a little bit for the better.
Well, do you think it's still hard for male candidates? I'm not sure how to treat female opponents in a debate or on the campaign trail.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's completely figured it out yet, but I think it's less risky than it used to be. If you remember Rick Lazio on stage approaching Hillary Clinton in the 2000 Senate run in New York, it was in Buffalo, New York, and he had the brilliant idea, or someone gave it to him, of walking across the stage and challenging Mrs. Clinton to sign a pledge or something. There was no pact. I forgot what the pledge was, and it looked threatening, And I remember watching it live and thinking, "Uh-oh, that was a mistake." You could just see it. Like on paper, it made sense. And then you walk over and give her the pledge and say, "I'll sign it right now." And in the green room beforehand, this all sounds great, but it just it completely backfired. And so I think a lot of male candidates have wondered how to do that. I think there's you don't have to go in with as male candidates. You don't have to go in with kid gloves the way you once feared you did.
Right.
I think you could it's a women are playing in hardball. They're playing hardball, a tough game, and they're giving it as much as they take it. And I think that's healthy. But you could screw up, Look at Joe Biden. You could screw up by you use the wrong expression, you use the wrong colloquialism, and you can walk into a trap. So you got to be really careful with that.
So let's shift gears for a second. What about what's going on in Washington with the Department of Homeland Security? It seems to me that there's nobody down there, right? Or are we down by? There's nobody. There's no Kirstjen Nielsen this morning. She resigned, but there's no one at ICE. There's no one right. The head of the Secret Service resigned this afternoon. There's a whole. I'd say it's also a shakeup, but it's more than a shakeup. And from everything I've read this afternoon, it looks like the Republicans in the Senate are really alarmed, and they're very openly telling the president not to think about discharging one more senior staffer in the Homeland Security Department because the pieces are falling apart.
Yeah, no, I think it's worrisome, and that's he's kind of in the habit of doing the you're fired, and he seems to enjoy doing that whenever he begins to sour on somebody, and that can happen pretty quickly with Trump. And there's just too many dangers in the world to do that. The one thing I am glad to see was both of our mutual friend Morgan Ortagus, who was on this show actually a few months ago, has been named spokeswoman for the State Department. So they've got one very good person down there, and maybe a lot of people saw Morgan on Fox News and elsewhere, but she's really, really bright and a great national security background. But you're right, at those top levels of Homeland Security, that's a problem.
Yes. And
the Secret Service guy is gone, and he was Trump's pick just 2 years ago, and suddenly he's out. So those things have consequences.
Yeah. Did you see, by the way, that our good friend Tony Saig is getting ready to leave the Treasury Department in May? I guess
did not see that.
Advance notice to the secretary that he's planning to leave in May and go into the private sector. So they've been interviewing folks for his job, and I don't know that he's publicly confirmed it, but it's that's a loss. He's been obviously you and I are partial to him, and I just think he's so solid all around. Both on he's got that fabulous balance of policy chops and PR skills. But listen,
and he's and he's a super bright guy, and Tony's did a great job down in the administration, and he managed to keep his head under the radar. I mean, he was in a pretty high profile spot, and there were a few times there were rumors floated that he might become White House press secretary, and And he obviously handled himself very, very well, and was always an asset in the administration, and nothing but, and is leaving on his terms, at the right time for him, obviously. And I think it's great. I think he'll be snapped up in the private sector in a moment.
He will be too. Yep, those skills. And I'm sure they would like him to join the campaign or something else. But listen, I think people forget those jobs don't pay a whole lot of money. You're working 24/7, literally 24/7. They come at huge sacrifice to your family. So, and I don't know what the salary is, maybe $150,000, which might seem reasonable to a lot of people, but not when you.
In Washington, not in Washington, yeah.
In Washington, and also you're not allowed to have investments in a lot of areas. I mean, you bear your soul completely clean, open, just to get your security clearance, and it's just a lot to ask of anybody. So I think we should all be grateful to these folks who do serve, and then when it's time to go, good for them. Good for them.
Yeah, and I mean, Tony has a young son in New York. I mean, they have children, and that's right. He lives in New York, but has been staying in Washington. That puts a lot of stress on a family too. So that's public service. That's real public service. And a great experience. Tony must have picked up. He was already brilliant going in, but he probably picked up so much in that position. And working for Mnuchin, who's clearly a pretty smart cookie himself, Tony's going to come out pretty well equipped to do whatever he wants.
Well, and also, listen, he spearheaded all the communications and messaging around the president's tax policy, tax reform, working both with the administration and the Hill and all the media. And I mean, if he did nothing else, he could have done that and walked away with a huge winner.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And by the way, Tony and Morgan have become friends. I talked to Morgan a few weeks ago, and she knows Tony really well, and they've become good friends. Oh, so it's a small world,
It is a small world. It is a small world.
One goes in, one comes out.
And have you ever felt the urge to go serve in the administration? Not necessarily this one, but at any time?
Not in this one. But yes, I should have done it when I was younger, or I should have tried to do it. But at the time, I was always working races in New York, and you can get stuck in that. It's like, oh, I can go down to Washington next year, but it's like, oh, we got the House race, we've got the state Senate race, and all these people, and you're so invested, and you're nose to nose with in our case with the Democrats, and we were constantly eyeball to eyeball to get an edge on them, and you sometimes you miss the bigger picture. So I think I blew my chance. I mean, I would do it now still, but I think I missed probably the best years to do it. I would have loved to, and I'm sure you don't regret any of it, right? Your Reagan Bush years.
Great experience. And, yes. And I also was really lucky. I started at OMB, which is, talk about a window of the world. I mean, you see every single dollar that's spent in the federal government and the sausage making to go with the spending. And it was invaluable. It still is. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times during the course of my work life that I draw on that experience. So, no, and I always recommend to anybody who has a chance to do it to go do it. Because you think you really know what it's all about, but you don't. And even now it's terrible because I think people view through cable news sort of what life is like if you're working in the government or working for those sleazy politicians or working, in the White House. And it's just not. There's so much more to it than that. So much more to it. So, yeah, I especially tell young kids, it's been particularly so, frankly, if you don't have a family, you really can just go pour yourself into it without any other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I know you work with Marlin Fitzwater, and we're a huge fan. Is there, will there ever be another Fitzwater speaking of White House press secretaries?
Well, he's so humble. He'd say, of course, and why was I so great? But I can't imagine. So, and I do think part of that, and I read and seen him talk about this, because he really was the last press secretary who had the luxury, frankly, of not having social media. So he really had the benefit of being able to, build relationships with reporters. There was so much trust. He still had a little bit of a, he had a longer leash when it came to reporters on deadline, and an embargo really was an embargo. All of that kind of stuff. And you and I have talked about this, to death. That's just gone. It's just simply gone. The rules changed so dramatically, and they really changed after he left. I mean, he finished after Bush 41 was done. So that was 1992. So listen, we all know what's happened since 1992 in media. Right. Just dramatic. I mean, CNN was a big deal then. That was the big thing.
That's right.
That was the cable network. And then it was the rest of it. So all this, he was, and also he had always, it's earned the respect of so many people in the media because he had been a writer himself. He was a reporter for the Abilene, Kansas paper, and he worked his way up through the government, the Treasury Department. So he really knew it, and he had great respect for the press. He wasn't a PR flack. He was actually he really was a reporter. So
they I'm sure they did their best to haze him. I mean, Helen Thomas could be a big pain in the butt, and during the Reagan administration, there wasn't a lot of love lost from a liberal-leaning media, but that was the impression that outsiders got, or at least this one, was that the press had enormous respect for him.
Yeah.
And that he left the job with more respect than when he came in. I mean, he was just they revered him.
They did. And gosh, so did the Bushes, and so did the administration, all the leaders in the administration.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, he's a real gift.
So what do you see any movement at all in this field, in this 2020 field? I know it's on the Democrats, yeah.
Well, I do think, they always, the old adage, follow the money. I think that's going to probably be the biggest indicator early on of who's in and who's not, and who's going to catch on, who's not, because it's such a big race. Don't you think? I mean, that's going to be the biggest, probably the first wave of people who leave are the ones who just can't raise enough money to even, get bumper stickers. So
right.
It doesn't mean it's early support as far as real polling, but I think this, and also these low dollar donors. Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders. I mean, these guys have been out getting the nickel and dime donors for, a year now, for their own PACs and for stuff. And that's obviously the sign of strength. So I do think they're the ones who are going to have the staying power. I don't know enough to see if there are any real dark horses. I am surprised, as you and I have talked about, some of the folks who just don't seem to have caught on at all. But it's hard to know what's going on the ground, right?
I think they'll get their turn. It'll be a line in the debate or something, and all the attention, because the attention moves on candidates now in a pack. I mean, it's not like one reporter goes and writes a piece on Cory Booker or something like that. If he says something that goes over well in the first debate, you'll have, 1,600 reporters writing stories about him, and every blog following, and he'll just catapult up. And then when they move on to the next one, it comes down. It seems like a different game. But I want to ask you, because speaking of large fields, was it 1988 when you did Pete DuPont's campaign for president? Is that right?
It was
88.
Yes, it was.
Or 92.
Let's be realistic. It was the 88 campaign, but we didn't make it through much of 88. We were out by February.
Yeah, but that's what I wanted to ask. What is it like on the presidential trail when you have, and Pete DuPont was a serious guy and had plenty of funding, self-funding, and a name that was, a household name, at least the last name. But he wasn't considered a front runner in the press. What's it like there out on the hustings when that's the case?
Well, it was certainly frustrating. Although, Pete, was endorsed by the Manchester Union leader. Pete's strategy, and I don't know how many candidates have this strategy that they actually publicly admit to. He did, that he had a two-state strategy. It was Iowa and New Hampshire. And he said if he didn't come in third in those two states, he was going to drop out. So I think you could debate whether it was a good idea to actually announce that in advance of his election or launching his campaign. I mean, that was his approach. Right. Of course, the other candidates say, great, we'll just make sure he comes in fourth, and that'll be the end of him. So he was actually running for an open. I mean, George Herbert Walker Bush was the sitting vice president, but technically it was an open seat because there wasn't an incumbent because Reagan was there. So there were six other candidates running, same on the Democrat side. So it is, the race there it's just attrition. It really isn't necessarily to win these primaries. It's kind of the win, place, or show. Everyone who gets out gets a ticket. Everyone who gets out first, second, or third gets a ticket to the next round. Sort of.
Right. And that was tough because you had. I worked on the Bush campaign that year a little, just a little bit. But it was Bush Dole with the predominant players.
Right.
And I guess you had Kemp out there too. So that was a pretty tough field to run in.
It was
like,
very
did you get pretty good coverage out on the trail?
We did much more in New Hampshire than we did in Iowa. first of all, Kemp and Pete, to some people, certainly to the conservatives, were indistinguishable. Although Kemp was arguably legitimately more conservative than Pete, although Pete had been, governor in Delaware and had a sterling record balancing his budget, and he was for basically all the litmus test points that conservative have to be for conservative positions. He was for them. So, but again, back to who were the outlets we were trying to get on. It was, you're right, Bush and Dole were up front, and then it was Pete and Kemp were fighting for the next whiff of air. But Pete got quite a few good newspaper endorsements, the key one being the Manchester Union Leader, which we thought would propel us to certain victory, and instead we came in fourth in New Hampshire. But you had Pat Robertson in that race also, right? Robertson in the race too. And I'll tell you, back in what I do think is so important and was really exciting back then, and it's just not the case anymore, is that there are weekly newspapers. There were a lot of daily newspapers in New Hampshire, but there are 7 or 8 weekly papers that made a huge difference. I mean, the electorate read those papers and read the daily papers and read the editorial endorsements. And then there was only one real TV station up there that mattered, which still is the WMUR, which is the ABC affiliate, which is a big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but the print coverage was fabulous, and we did radio interviews all day, every day. It was the classic, get in the car, drive around from Derry, New Hampshire to Laconia, New Hampshire.
Beepers, right? They called them beepers back then, right?
Yeah, and then it just, I don't know, you have that anymore. I think that's probably the biggest thing that voters are robbed of now, is that good old-fashioned access to maybe hearing in the first person from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. You're right about those weekly papers too. I mean, I grew up in politics on the importance of weekly newspapers, and what we would always say is that if someone who reads weekly news is a voter, is definitely going to vote. If you're reading the weekly newspaper, for your town news, you're voting. You know what I mean? So talk to them there.
Yep, that's exactly right. Well, but we've talked about too.
Go ahead, Liz. I'm sorry.
I'm just worried. I really worry so much about the fact that without local news coverage, period, people just don't know what's going on. I've been talking to people in my town about this a lot over the last 2 weeks. It's very hard to get information to your neighbors and to people in town about whether stuff, what's going on in your business district or in your parks and recreation or anything else. It's really tough.
Yeah. No, there's a bunch of, models that have been tried, and some are doing better than others. But remember the Patch and those with great fanfare. But the number of papers that have disappeared throughout America it's staggering. It's tens of thousands of papers, of small ones. It's really sad.
And do you think that's permanent? There's just no chance any of that's going to come back?
I think it's permanent. I think it's just turned into something different already. And there's some towns have robust news websites. I mean, here in New York and in Connecticut, that Daily Voice has done pretty well, which is quick news, and it's hyper localized, which works well, and they figured out how to do it with a fairly small staff. And but in some areas, the local paper is still the paper. The weekly still predominates. So, but I think it turns into something else, and it's impossible to predict what that's going to be. Very, very tough. We should talk more about that. I'd love to maybe get an editor on. Actually, I've one in mind who wanted to be on, a Gannett editor, to come on the show and talk about the changes in that industry. It could be interesting.
Yeah, yep. Speaking of that, I don't know if it's a rumor or it's been confirmed that the Journal News, our paper, is going to be being sold, and the big fear is it's going to be it's going to fold any day or any minute right after that happens.
Yeah. Which is, and the Daily News in New York is about to go apparently, and
big.
These are once great papers. Yep.
Yeah.
Once great papers.
Do you have all the local cable? I mean, I wonder what the ratings are. I don't know if there's any way to track this, of the local stations around the country. Just the ones that broadcast your local village board meeting and your town board meeting, and the local political shows like the one that you're on regularly here in Westchester County.
Yep. Those do remarkably well. They don't get massive viewership, And by the way, it's 32-29, and Virginia's up by 3. A lot of those public access shows do really well. They have very loyal viewerships, and they're built in. The municipalities build them into their contracts, where they have to have a channel set aside to do local news. But people who watch those shows really watch those shows. I mean, they'll sit and watch 5 hours of a hearing, and God knows you've sat in enough of those, Liz, and run enough as a mayor. But that's it's a very small constituency, but it sure is a loyal constituency.
Yes.
I think the more of that we can get, the better. I mean, the local stuff is good.
How are the I wonder how the ratings are for cable right now with Trump. If people just had there's nothing really new. It's the same old, same old. So if the MSNBC, CNBC ratings are, I think Fox's ratings are always, are consistently very high.
Yeah, I saw them late last week, and Fox was still back on top. It was beating the New York Times and CNN and others. But there has to have been a drop off after the Mueller report, I would think. I know I kind of dropped off a little bit because that's what I wanted to see. Was there anything indictable? Whether you can indict a city president or not, I guess you can't. But was there anything indictable in the report? And once I knew that there wasn't, I wasn't so keen to check every 5 minutes. So there had to have been a drop off. But I guess it'll pick up as the presidential race heats up. But we'll watch for that.
Do you think that there's ever going to be the level of interest in forcing Trump to release his taxes that there was around the interest in, the fervor around the Mueller report? Because, this is subpoenas now being threatened to be issued, and Congress saying, several members saying they're going to demand it. And I just read today that Cuomo said he's going to get behind any effort that tries to force the issue. Do you think the average voter or citizen cares anymore?
I think they look stupid doing that, and that drives me crazy, Liz. Is when we change the rules to fit our short-term political gain, and you see that in Washington and in state capitals all the time, where you have constitutional norms or just legislative body norms, and you end up throwing this stuff out because you want something there. There's nothing that requires a candidate to give in a tax return. There's plenty of reports that you have to file, financial disclosure reports that actually go deeper than tax returns. And just because they want to get Donald Trump doesn't mean that they should change the rule for everybody. I mean, it's so knee-jerk, and both parties do it, and it just drives me crazy. It really bugs me. But I mean, the Democrats will stick on that. I think it's a losing proposition because they just look like they're chasing a story that's dead. I mean, maybe something else will pop up when the report in full is released, but as of right now, it looks like they're just howling at the moon, from my perspective, anyway.
And so, should I infer from that you don't think that candidates should have to release their tax returns?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I just don't. There's got to be some privacy, and most candidates do, and it's customary. And I always hate that part of a campaign when the invariable press call comes in, and it's like, "Oh, you're going to release your taxes?" Like what some reporter calls, and then you're like, "Yeah, we'll get there," and then the next day you get hit with the press release from the opponent. So and so won't release his taxes in a timely manner, and so eventually you break down and you release like 3 years, and they say, "Oh, they won't release 5 years. They need 7 years." 10, what I mean? And it's just a stupid game. And there's always a couple of stories in there, how much somebody wrote off for their underwear, they used underwear, that kind of thing, or what they give to charity. But I don't think. I mean, what the public needs to know is where there's conflicts of interest. Do you hold stock in this area? Are you invested in this company? Because you're making policy decisions that could enrich you, and the voters need to know that. They don't need to know everything that's in a tax return. I just, I don't think they do. And already, states are passing laws. New York has a bill in now and I think several other states do as well, that would say that they will not allow a presidential candidate to run in a presidential primary in that state without having released a tax return. And so you would take New York off the table for an election. And it's all so short-sighted, when you do that kind of stuff, the other guys are going to do it too, and you're all going to regret it at the end. But, as much as I'd love to take a peek at at Donald Trump's taxes, I don't have a right to, and I don't think anyone else does. And by the way, I suspect Robert Mueller took a peek at them. I mean, he had the authority to do that, and I'd be shocked if he didn't take a look. Don't you think?
Well, certainly, because as we know, one of the big issues here is, are you subject to or vulnerable to bribery, extortion, blackmail, or anything else? And given this whole business around, Trump's relationship with Putin and how much of that the dynamic between the two of them was about business dealings and stuff, I would imagine, which then would, make Trump arguably vulnerable to pressure from Putin that Mueller probably did. Yes, I would say the answer to that is yes.
Right. But if the financial disclosure reports should have had all of that, and if it didn't, then there's a crime committed, and there's no suggestion that there was one. But you've done the financial disclosure reports when you ran for office in New York, and they're fairly invasive. I mean, they want to know everything, and it's public, and that should be enough. Anyway, I think our time is probably up. I think Rick very kindly let us go over a few minutes.
Okay. All right. Saying go Virginia Tech, but Texas Tech. That's number one.
It's halftime. Yep, halftime 32-29. So it's a nail biter.
And next Monday will be our least favorite day of the year. It'll be April 15th. All of you. You know what that means?
Boo! Tax day.
Ready to file.
And New York is once again the highest tax state in America. So we lead in something. So.
Yeah. We're number one. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Rick, and thanks, Liz.
Okay, bye.
Good night.
Majesties. The fruited plain. But now wait a minute. I'm talking about America, sweet America.